$40 to $90-ish million a week of U.S. taxpayer dollars in cash going to the Taliban. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. The really interesting part is a lot of people focus on the humanitarian dollars, which is the 40 million.
Yep.
But, according to people I talk to, when the plane comes weekly, depending on the weight of the plane, it has between 43 and 87 million, meaning there are weeks where if 40 million's humanitarian dollars, 47 million is given in pure cash to do counterterrorism operations. And it's like people focus on the humanitarian dollars, but it's that counterterrorism dollars that are going to the terrorist groups, and there's no accountability of it. And it's super dangerous. And it's an easy thing to turn off because obviously the Taliban is not doing effective counterterrorism operations. ISIS in Afghanistan has grown by 30%. Al-Qaeda is up to 50,000 members. I can't even believe I'm saying that, right? So there is no reason to even give them any counterterrorism dollars at this point.
Yeah, I mean, to me, and I know that they don't list the Taliban as a terrorist group.
Never have.
But the Doha Agreement was agreed on that they would not support terrorism, which I felt was null and void from the beginning because they are a terrorist group and they have supported a terrorist group. If I, as a humanitarian that has done rescue operations in this, if I would go to Afghanistan to move an American out and I would give the Taliban $10, the DOJ would put me in jail for giving that money. I mean...
Yeah, they were giving people even a hard time about buying passports for Americans from the Taliban. It's like, hey, you guys are the ones who made the deal with them and made the government, right? Yeah, but the U.S. government can do it just fine and give them as much money as they want.
And they're giving it to them for counterterrorism, but in fact, it's funding terrorism. I mean, we were talking about the withdrawal. Again, we've left Americans there. We left our allies there. We left 40 million people to the hands of the Taliban. We left 20 million women and little girls. And I can never not mention that because these little girls and these women are women that were journalists and school teachers and doctors. And these little girls, as young as 9 years old, are now sex slaves. And we did that. And not to mention, I don't know the number. It changes billions of dollars in equipment that we left behind that we know is being used for terrorism. And now we're giving this money, this taxpayer money to them. And it's being kept quiet. They're not talking about it. And part of the pathway, they're saying, is through these NGOs. But these NGOs are not the same NGOs that have been there forever. These NGOs have been overtaken. They're just a shell of what they were. And the Taliban are running these NGOs there. And that's supposed to be providing the humanitarian aid.
Yep. Yeah. They basically gutted a lot of the NGOs or they just made new NGOs. But regardless, there's a law in Afghanistan now. Every NGO has to have a Taliban member on the board. So basically every NGO has Taliban leadership.
And so they're going to do it.
Yeah. And the other really interesting thing is that always gets lost too is, you know, we talk about aid, but there's also the World Food Program. So the World Food Program, their food is actually what is the food served at all the Al-Qaeda's training camps. So the World Food Program is feeding the terrorists being trained. That's how bad it is.
Yeah, it's so insane to me. We're U.S. taxpayer dollars, World Food Program, or paying for training, paying for the food, paying for logistics to prepare an enemy for another attack on us.
Yeah, it's insanity.
There's one piece that you mentioned, I heard you mention, and I want to actually put some emphasis on it because it disturbs me more than anything else. It shouldn't disturb me more than anything else, but I'm a very principled person. Part of our taxpayer dollars that are going in with this 43 to 87 million a week is what you said, right? Is more a fee for Taliban that we killed in Afghanistan to go to the families of the Taliban fighters. Is that right?
Yeah. So there's a program that basically, if your family member died fighting the Americans, you get money, and some of the humanitarian dollars that we provide goes to the families of the martyrs. The other interesting thing is we also give money to the Ministry of Interior, and the Ministry of Interior also has a martyrs program, and their martyrs program is a little different, and they basically are trying to recruit you to come back to Afghanistan with your family so they can train the next generation. And in that one, you get a house, right? You get land, and you get $1,000 a month, just to come back to Afghanistan and carry on the terrorist tradition of your family.
And you and I are paying for that.
Yes.
Every U.S. taxpayer listening is paying for that. It's silly even asking you this question, but how's that fair to the U.S. service members' families that died in Afghanistan? Why was the martyr fee for them?
Yeah, it's like the ultimate betrayal. And I think that's why it's not being talked about, right? Because if the veteran community really understood that we're paying, right, for the families of the martyrs, like you think they'd be all in their Congress people's office being like, stop the money now, stop the money now. There's very few Congress people, even in Congress, discussing this money. Like 90% of our Congress people are perfectly fine with us sending this money to the Taliban. That's a problem. Like vote them out or make them do their job.
Yeah. If an American thinks that you and I are just making this up, where could they find information on that?
The best place always is SIGAR, right?
Inspector General for Afghanistan Review or something.
Exactly, yeah. So they do a lot of they've always done like the corruption investigations in Afghanistan. So they do at least the best job of the humanitarian dollars. Nobody's really talking about the counterterrorism dollars. And one of the big issues with that is the dollar amount of those counterterrorism dollars are in the annexes of the Doha deal. The annexes of the Doha deal are classified. So people are concerned about talking about those dollars because like, oh no, am I going to talk about classified info? So basically, I went about it the opposite direction. So those dollars, those counterterrorism dollars showed up with AQIM in Africa. I was like, where the dollars come from? And they said, oh, it was the Taliban money the U.S. gave them to fight ISIS. And then I worked backwards to it, and it ended up coming Kabul to Kandahar, et cetera, and moving to Africa, right? So we need to start talking about how our dollars are being proliferated to a number of terrorist groups. It's not just Al-Qaeda, it's not just AQIM, it's TTP, right? They had 800 attacks last year in Pakistan, their biggest resurgence yet. It's going to ISKP. I put a whole report out in May about how one of our 2012 Benghazi plotters takes the U.S. counterterrorism dollars to fight ISKP and gives it to ISKP in Pakistan. He moves the money to them. Like, that's how bad it is.
This is not hard to investigate, by the way.
No, it's not. I mean, I'm doing it on a shoestring budget.
Yeah. I mean, anybody, had access to the accounting behind this could be able to follow the money. And so certainly our White House has to know. You talked about ISIS dollars going through the as part of the Doha Agreement. Is there dollars that actually like that we know that's going to directly to ISIS, or
no? The dollars are supposed to be to fight ISIS and terrorism, and the dollar amount isn't classified. But that's the money we give to like the Ministry of Interior that Sirajuddin Haqqani runs, and then the GDI, which is basically the CIA of the Taliban, and that's run by Wasik, who was released for Bergdahl. So that's where their money comes from. It comes from the Doha deal, and that's why we want to end the Doha deal to also end the counterterrorism dollars, because that gets forgotten.
The Doha deal, I know. I mean, first of all, like if you get elected as president of the United States and you move in, you can't blame your last opponent. Mm-hmm. If you choose, you're like, oh, I only did that because the last president was doing it, so you could change, right? You could change trajectory. So I know a lot of times President Biden's like, I just continued on what President Trump was doing. Well, if you didn't like it, do something different. But President Trump has caught some heat for the Doha deal. What's different about it? I mean, was there a difference between the Doha deal that President Trump was working to what actually took place, or is it the same deal?
So it's the same deal. The biggest issue with the Trump side of the deal is he only negotiated the deal with the Taliban and left all of Afghan society out, right? Valid argument, and it really is the main reason the fall happened. Now, when you get to the Biden administration, the biggest part of the deal is the Trump administration put in real red lines, and the Taliban broke a red line, broke a red line, broke a red line. And the Biden administration said, yeah, we know they're breaking the red lines, but we just want to get out of Afghanistan at all costs. We are no longer enforcing the red lines. So those are the two issues between the two administrations, and the Doha deal is completely failed, and it is both fault, right? Yeah. And that even started before Trump. The reconciliation, like I said, started under Biden. Yeah. So it's 3 administrations of this Taliban negotiation.
Yeah. One of the things that I had pointed out, and I'm not sure if I'm correct, this is just from me talking to people inside the Trump administration, is that there would have been a support of a contingent international effort to support and advise the Afghan National Army. So I don't know if that would have been the case or not. But the red lines would have been, if those would have been enforced, we would not be where we are today.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure at least the way the Trump administration had done the Doha deal, they wanted some sort of leave behind. But again, they miscalculated in just doing the deal with the Taliban, because obviously it gave no power to anybody else within Afghanistan when the deal went through.
The Afghan government that we spent 20 years putting in place.
Yeah. And it's a betrayal.
Yeah.
And a lot of them feel that betrayal, and now it then affects how they work with us and those type of things too.
How is this money, I keep wanting to emphasize, US taxpayer dollars, being used by the Taliban to hunt down our allies that we left behind? Like intentionally hunting them down and going out and killing our allies because of what they did for America. Is U.S. taxpayers' dollars being used for that?
Yes, it is. So as I told you, how U.S. taxpayer dollars are going to the Ministry of Interior and the GDI, okay? So what the Ministry of Interior is responsible for is they run the biometrics program that we left behind. So they're using those biometrics to help hunt down our allies. Then the GDI is the entity that then brings them in-house and tortures them or kills them, et cetera. And they're the ones holding the 3 Americans, to include Ryan Corbett, right? So yeah, those are the 2 main entities hunting down our allies, and we're funding both entities with U.S. taxpayer dollars.
Including those that have 3 Americans captive.
Correct.
Right now. Even if we want to keep giving them money, no more money till you give us our Americans, right? That should be a pretty simple phone call.
Should be, but remember, unfortunately, the GDI now is an ally because we're allied with the Taliban. So we're oddly allied in funding the people, like you said, holding the Americans. And it's a failed policy that no one will be honest, but it's a failed policy. We just keep going with it.
Right.
And remember, right now, our politicians don't think discussing Afghanistan or dealing with Afghanistan is advantageous. So that's why 90% of your Congress people aren't doing anything about it, because they don't think it'll get them votes. So you need to show up in their office and tell them, I will not vote for you, if you allow this to continue. They have to know this is an issue to people.
Yep. If you guys missed that listening, that is a straight call to action to every American. Let your member, your congressional member, your senator, know that this is important to you. That giving $43 to $87 million a week to our enemies and Taliban that are training, and we're going to get into that, for the next attack to the United States, that are holding American hostages, that are using that money to hunt down our allies, that are sexually enslaving women and children, that are using our tax dollars to do that. That's not okay, and you'll vote them out. That's the only currency that politicians understand.
I know.
Is votes. That's it.
Exactly.
They don't understand morality or what's right or what's wrong. And I have friends in Congress, so I know there's good people there. I know there's good people there. But for the large part, most people in Washington, D.C. and in any political office, the only currency they understand is votes. And you can't tell them you're upset. You can tell them, I'm not going to vote for you. And I'm going to tell everyone I know not to vote for you unless you take active, be boisterous in ending this. One of the things you talked about on Sean's show that I really want you to touch on is the 8 stops that this money makes. That was really fascinating to me, and I'd love you to share how this money takes place.
Yeah, so remember how I said I went backwards from AQIM receiving the money? So AQIM, from what I know, but I actually only found out about the last few shipments, so I don't know how long those shipments were going there. But from those last few, that was $100 million US dollars to AQIM, like our dollars, our taxpayer dollars. So when we did the investigation to go backwards, we're like, so how did the money, get from the plane?
Yeah.
And remember, it wasn't humanitarian dollars, so it didn't go through the bank like the humanitarian dollars.
It's cash.
Right? Yeah. So how did it get there to Kandahar, where it moved out? So obviously, I won't exactly say, how we figured it out. But basically, when it leaves the plane, the counterterrorism dollars do have, like I said on Sean Ryan's show, 8 stops, right? Now, I'm not sure if I can remember all the 8 stops right now, but basically the first stop is the prime minister of the Taliban, Mullah Muhammad Hassan Akhund. He's just one of those original 6 people who set up the Taliban back in the day. The number 2 is Mullah Abdul Ghani Barater, right?
Which, by the way, I want to make a point. 3 years ago, we would have killed him.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. We're talking top 10 Taliban, right? These are U.S. targets. Yeah, these names are known to anybody who served in Afghanistan.
You would have been a CIA targeter. You'd have been putting a team on him to capture or kill him.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the number 2 is Mullah Barater, right? Who did the Doha deal? Obviously, he's basically the deputy prime minister of the Taliban, and he's actually one of the key people right now that are interacting with Al Qaeda, with Saif al-Adil from Al Qaeda, with the Quds Force in Iran, because the Taliban and Al Qaeda are helping supplement fighters in Iraq and Syria for to support kind of the Hamas regional fighting efforts. So he's very involved in that, besides supporting every other terrorist group inside Afghanistan.
So he's getting US dollars to support all the terrorist networks in Southeast Asia and Middle East.
Yes. Don't get me started. And then, I don't know the exact order. Another one of the deliveries then goes to the head of the GDI, who I told you is holding the 3 Americans. That's Wasik, again, released for Bergdahl. The next, basically, 2 go to Sirajuddin Haqqani. So one goes to his, basically, office, the Ministry of Interior, and then one goes to his residence. And again, Sirajuddin Haqqani is one on the FBI most wanted list for $10 million. So this is also a sanctions violation, right? That the U.S. could be charged for.
He's still on the FBI most wanted list?
And he has sanctions against him. Actually, Mullah Mohammed Hassan Akhund, the number 1, has sanctions. Mullah Barader has sanctions. Wasik has sanctions. And Sirajuddin Haqqani.
So we're sending cash to all 4 of them.
All 4 were breaking our own laws.
And so when you say breaking a law, I guess, can you explain what that means? Like,
let's say you have a company and you want to do business in Iran, but the company you want to do business in Iran has a sanctions against them, right? Because they have an affiliation with the Iranian government. Mm-hmm. So if you were going to do a business deal and buy, I don't know, computer keyboards from that company, you would be charged, right? Because they have sanctions against them, right? And the U.S. government deemed that's dangerous if you do business with them. So these people have sanctions against them, which means U.S. persons cannot do business with them, which also means the U.S. government can't do business with them. The interesting part is I've seen no waivers put into place for us to give money, let's say, to the Haqqanis, because also the Haqqani network is a designated terrorist organization. But one of the greatest examples of a sanctions violation that is chargeable is the Taliban made new currency. I don't know if you've seen it, right? They have Gulager's name on it, and they put a little more impostu. That was in English. Yeah. They printed that in Poland. The U.S. government basically gave a waiver so the money could move through SWIFT, right? This is sanctioned people moving money through SWIFT to pay the Polish bill for the money. Completely against the law. It's against U.S. law. It's against EU law. So again, there's actually cases we can charge against our own government for this. So yeah. So
who's responsible for would be the DOJ?
So the DOJ Treasury Department is who puts sanctions in place. Okay. And then Treasury Department should say this is a sanctions violation and then get the appropriate, it would be probably some sort of district attorneys to say, yes, we would charge X, Y, and Z in our federal court or whatever.
Yeah. Wow.
So then those are the Taliban deliveries, and I hope I didn't miss anyone in Taliban. Then the money goes, so that's all kind of in Kabul.
Right.
Then the money moves to Kandahar, and this is where I found my AQI money. And when the money moves to Kandahar, it goes to the head of the Taliban, but then it goes to Al-Qaeda. So there's basically a delivery to the head of the Taliban, Hibatullah Akhundzada, and then it goes to Saif al-Adil, right, who's basically running the external operations of Al-Qaeda, and he's planning the U.S. homeland attack. And then the last delivery goes to the bin Laden family household, where basically 3 of bin Laden's sons live.
And it's crazy. So what's the bin Laden's role in terrorism right now? I mean, obviously, the father being Osama bin Laden, the three sons, right? Mm-hmm. Are they retaliatory for what happened to the father?
Yeah, so at least the U.S. homeland plot that Saif al-Adil is planning, it's directed by Hamza bin Laden, and it's the plot in honor of his father.
And so he has a plot to attack the United States in retaliation for us killing Osama, and we're sending him money.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we don't follow our own money and watch where our money goes, and we send it in U.S. dollars. And then, so they basically say, oh, well, we don't know where the money went. Well, people found it out. It's not that hard to follow.
No.
Vehicles moving large chunks of U.S. dollars from an airport.
Yeah. Wow. Is that all 8? Yeah, that's enough.
Yeah, I think that we got all 8.
Yeah, I'm just trying to take it all in because that's just so disturbing to me, and injustice in general, like especially with stuff like this. This is, I mean, a lot of people throw the word treason around. This is treasonous behavior. I know treason is supposed to be tied to active war, but the war on terrorism is a war. And so to me, like, and this is my very strong opinion this is treasonous behavior and criminal behavior on behalf of the United States government.
Well, when the U.S. homeland attack happens, and if it's successful, there will be people charged, 100%.
I sure hope
for
so.
aiding and abetting the enemy.
I sure hope so, but I hope it could be resolved before an attack.